Stalinism is a favorite phrase among the opponents of communism, especially when it comes to the historic role of Joseph Stalin in the construction of socialism in the leadership of the USSR. The word Stalinist is used mainly to denote a negative connotation and is a label frequently used against socialists. Yet despite its ubiquitous use, Stalinism has no precise definition. What is Stalinism, and how appropriate is the use of this term from the perspective of Marxist political science? The first person to coin the term Stalinism was New York Times journalist Walter Duranty. Living in Moscow during the first 5-year plans, Duranty described the Soviet regime as one of total control by the state, party dictatorship orchestrated by the political tyranny of Stalin. Duranty invented the idea of Stalinism to define such a regime as a personal apparatus of Stalin himself. The term was soon adopted by Leon Trotsky, the ardent opponent of Stalin and Soviet power. From the second half of the 1930s, Trotsky and his supporters full-heartedly disseminated the label of Stalinism as a means of condemnation for the entire Soviet state. The idea was quickly taken up by all opponents of the USSR and state socialism, including anarchists, social democrats, liberals, and conservatives in the capitalist countries. Thus, the term Stalinism originated out of a milieu of anti-Soviet and anti-communist propaganda, and was intended mainly to carry a negative meaning. Taking them at their word that Stalinism forms its own political theory, it is typically defined by the following features: socialism in one country, commodity production and the law of value under socialism, the aggravation of the class struggle and the strengthening of the state as socialist construction, the necessity of the state under socialism. Despite the claims of anti-Soviet ideologists, Stalin was not the author behind the idea of building socialism in a single country. In August 1890, Friedrich Engels, in his letter on local socialism, wrote, "To my mind, the so-called socialist society is not anything immutable. Like all other social formations, it should be conceived in a state of constant flux and change. Its crucial difference from the present order consists naturally in production organized on the basis of common ownership by the nation of all means of production." From this letter, it can be seen that Engels also advocated the idea of building socialism on the basis of common ownership by the nation, that is, within one country. Vladimir Lenin was also an active ideologist and practitioner of building socialism in one country. In 1915, he wrote, "Uneven economic and political development is an absolute law of capitalism. Hence, the victory of socialism is possible first in several or even in one capitalist country alone. After expropriating the capitalists and organizing their own socialist production, the victorious proletariat of that country will rise against the rest of the world, the capitalist world." Stalin was one of the first Marxist theorists to put forward, justify, and apply the proposition that commodity production was necessary under socialism for a certain period. In the famous works of Marx and Engels, Critique of the Gotha Program and Anti-Düring, the authors state that commodity exchange and circulation of money are impossible under socialism. It must be noted, however, that due to their objective historical circumstances, they could not know in practical detail how future socialist revolutions would take place. For many socialist countries, it was necessary to have a controlled and decaying industry of commodity production. This is a commodity production without capitalists or financial speculators, without exploitation and accumulation, without domination by capital itself, where labor and the means of production are no longer commodities. Stalin first spoke about the aggravation of the class struggle and the strengthening of the Soviet state in 1926 in response to Bukharin's theory of first growing into socialism and the decay of the class struggle. It is these provisions that can be considered his contribution to the theory of Marxism, which was tested by practice. At the same time, Lenin noted that for the state to wither away completely, complete communism is necessary. The main provisions of Marxism developed by Stalin, despite its great importance, cannot claim to be a separate ideological trend because they do not revise the basic foundations of Marxist-Leninist theory. Leon Trotsky, Richard Pipes, Erich Fromm, and other denouncers of Stalinism highlight the following features as those of its practice. Personal dictatorship and the cult of the leader. Totalitarianism, the command administrative system and the bureaucracy. As defined in the political science of Marxism-Leninism, state power lays always in the hands of a ruling class and is exercised in the interest of that class. A political dictatorship is thus one of open and uncompromising dictatorship by one class over another. Stalin, being primarily a spokesman for the interests of the working class, was never a dictator by those terms. His leadership position was constitutionally defined, with powers subservient to the decisions of the legislative and judicial arms of the party. Stalin's famous cult of personality was initiated from below and never encouraged by Stalin himself. On the contrary, he could not tolerate servility to his addresses. In response to such actions by party functionaries, Stalin wrote, "You speak of your devotion to me. I would advise you to discard the principle of devotion to persons. It is not the Bolshevik way. Be devoted to the working class, its party, its state." Totalitarianism is a bourgeois theory whose roots go back to the first full-fledged theorists of fascism, Benito Mussolini. Later, on this basis, anti-communist ideologists invented the concept that a totalitarian regime is one in which everything is subject to the state and everything is controlled by it. However, even in the most democratic republic with pluralism and multi-party systems, capital holds tight control of all spheres of society. The concept of totalitarianism is a convenient tool that allows bourgeois demagogues to denigrate their capitalist competitors and socialist countries, such as the Soviet Union. Under the so-called command and control system, the anti-communists conceive a centrally planned economy which is controlled by unilateral directives from above. However, the concept of a command and control system is merely the invention of bourgeois spin doctors. Socialist economy is always one of strict accounting and planning based on public ownership of the means of production. Such a planned economy existed in the Soviet Union under Stalin and after him. Attempts to blame one person for all the shortcomings and mistakes of an entire country are the bold-faced manipulations of anti-communists based on the facile approach of material and historical processes. Stalin was just a man, behind whom stood the entire working people of the Soviet Union. Thus, having considered different approaches to the concepts within Stalinism, one can draw the conclusion that, in reality, Stalinism never existed. The term is unscientific and does not stand up to any criticism by Marxist methodology. Those who utilize the bourgeois media's Stalinism oppose the works of theoreticians such as Lenin and Stalin, thereby discrediting and obscuring Marxism. Stalin continued Lenin's work, developing the theory and practice of Marxism-Leninism, to which he remained committed to the end of his life. Stay tuned.